the promised land. What does that phrase mean anyway? For some people, it refers to heaven, where all our earthly troubles will be over. Well, we Unitarian Universalists don't talk too much about heaven. Well, for others, it refers to an ideal way, a way of life that may be projected in literature. It was started, the term utopia, for example, started with Sir Thomas More's book, Utopia, written in 1515. Or those utopian communities like Brook Farm, some started by Unitarians back in the 19th century in this country. The promised land is used, in fact, to refer to America itself, or the ideals of freedom and democracy that our country represented and still represents to so many peoples of the world. Our special calling as a nation was powerfully articulated in a sermon by John Winthrop, the first leader of the Massachusetts Bay Colony, on board ship, even before landing in the New World. And this is what he said. He said, "We must consider that we shall be as a city upon a hill. The eyes of all people are upon us." In other words, we should be, this country, this new country, should be a model for all of the people of the world. And of course, the American West has always been the outlying frontier of this American promised land. And here in the Northwest is where the edge of newness and experimentation is found. It is here that this American dream is most alive. Now, this term, promised land, originated in the book of Exodus, and you heard the story this morning about Moses. It's from the Hebrew scripture. Most of you remember the story. The Israelites had fallen on hard times. They were enslaved in Egypt, and God appeared to Moses in a burning bush, as you recall, and told him he was to lead his people out of Egypt. He was to go to Pharaoh and say, "Okay, let my people go." So God made a covenant with the people and promised to bring them out of slavery into a land flowing with milk and honey. But there was one caveat. Moses himself will not be allowed to enter the promised land. So the leader will not be allowed to enter the promised land. Now let me tell you this morning about a couple of individuals who changed our lives and changed our nation, but like Moses, never got to the promised land. The first person I want to tell you about is Susan B. Anthony. Susan B. Anthony led the women's suffrage movement in the 19th century. When little Susan was 6 years old, she was sent to a local school district in New York where a teacher refused to teach her long division because she was a girl. So her father took her out of that school and taught her himself. She attended the Rochester Women's Rights Convention in 1848, 2 weeks after the historic Seneca Falls Convention, and she plunged headlong into activism. Once a Quaker, she became a Unitarian, and she began to work in the temperance movement and in the anti-slavery movement. In 1851, she was introduced to Elizabeth Cady Stanton, who was to remain a close colleague and a friend for all of her life. It was around this time that she began to gain notoriety as a powerful public speaker on women's rights. In 1856, Anthony attempted to unify the African American and the women's rights movements, but was opposed by her friend Frederick Douglass. And the Equal Rights Association then voted to support the 15th Amendment to the Constitution, granting suffrage to black men, but not women. For casting a vote in the presidential election held on November 5, 1872, Anthony was arrested. She pled not guilty, saying that the 14th Amendment entitled her to vote, for it provides that all persons born in the United States shall not be denied the privileges of citizenship, and she was a person. She was defended by a female lawyer who claimed that the United States was truly on trial, not Anthony. At the trial, she made a most amazing speech. In part, she stated, "To women, this government is not a democracy. It is not a republic. It is an odious aristocracy, a hateful oligarchy of sex, the most hateful aristocracy ever established on the face of the globe, an oligarchy of wealth where the rich govern the poor, this oligarchy of sex which makes fathers, brothers, husbands, sons the oligarchs over the mother and sisters, the wife and daughters of every household, which ordains all men sovereigns, all women subjects, carries dissension, discord, and rebellion into every home of the nation. Well, the judge delivered an opinion of guilty, which he had written before the trial even begun, and he sentenced Antony to pay $100. She responded, "May it please your honor, I will never pay $1 of your unjust penalty." She never paid the fine, and the government never pursued her for non-payment. They didn't want to risk hearing another speech. So, no, Susan B. Anthony did not get to the promised land. She died 14 years, 5 months, and 5 days before the passage of the 19th Amendment, giving women the right to vote. That was in 1920, within the lifetime of persons still living. Well, things have changed. Now, in January of 2008, we have a woman who is a viable candidate for President of the United States. Yes, things change. Or maybe I should say, people change things. And more change will be coming for women. More change needs to come. It's not done yet. One thing that I have learned is that anything human takes time. So more change will be coming.